Alright guys, today we were doing multiplying and dividing integers, and we did about 20 questions, if you can remember, in class, and you had 5 of each, and you used a calculator and the negative button when it applied when you did your answers. What we found out is you're going to have 10 positive answers and 10 negative answers. And what I asked you to do then was to break it down a little bit and see what made a positive answer and see what made a negative answer. So this chart here in front of you, positive times a positive equals, and all these ones here, this one breaks it down. And when you look at your answers and the questions we did, a positive times a positive will always give you a positive answer. A negative times a negative will always give you a positive answer. These opposite ones of a negative times a positive or a positive times a negative, they both gave you negative answers in all of your answers today. Division was the absolute same. Remember that we use sum, multiplication, sum, division, because multiplication, division, the rule applies to both. So again, if you are dividing two positive integers, you're going to have positive answers. If you're dividing two negative integers, you're going to have a positive answer. If the signs are opposite of each other or different, you will only get negative answers. So that's where we started with today, is we made sure that we understood what kind of answers will get us what, and then we tried to put it in a rule, and some people listed them all out individually, and that's okay, but when we're trying to remember stuff like this, we want it in a way that we can remember it. So here's what we wrote as our note today. So when you multiply or divide integers and they have the same signs, and maybe you should highlight this or bubble letter this or do something to let them know it's the same, your answer is always going to be positive. And I should all put the word always. And when multiplying and dividing, and I should say two integers, because it only works when you're doing two of them at a time, and they have different signs, a positive negative or a negative positive, the answer will always be negative. And we did a bunch of examples today. You saw that. I think that part wasn't too hard. Now it's going to get to the idea of remembering that versus what we did previously with addition and subtraction. And I cannot get you to think enough about the idea between those two, that when we add or subtract, when you add or subtract integers, you have to use common sense a little bit. There is no set pattern. It is always different. So you must use your logic, and I really suggest you use that situation that I made up about, magic hot cubes and cold cubes. And yes, it sounds a little bit silly, but when you're doing it in your head, there is no way to get the answer wrong using that script. You might do a little calculation error and it should have been 8 and you get 9, but if the answer was 9, there's no way you'll be over a -5. You won't be way off if you use that internal script. So when you're adding integers or subtracting integers, you have to use that script we talked about. So I wrote down one question. I'm going to go through it one more time, and then I'm going to write it out. I know we have it lots in our notes, but until you get this, maybe you should write this out a few times. I would just suggest you say it orally. You say it out loud for a bit, and soon, very, very soon, this will all be in your head and be very quick. But anyhow, what you got to figure out is, what operation am I doing, and what am I doing to it? So at first, I know I'm going to be adding. I know I'm going to be adding a colder number. I'm going to be adding cold to my mixture. So I say I'm going to add 3 cold. Later, and as you get older, and in grade 8 and grade 9, you'll be saying I'm adding negative numbers, or I'm adding a smaller number, because -3 is smaller than 3 per se. But right now you can just say I am adding 3 cold, and therefore you know it is going to get colder. It being your magical mixture, it will get colder. So you already know it's going to be colder, so that sets you up on which way you're going down the number line. And if you're getting colder, you know, therefore, if it's getting colder, I will be going to my left. And then you say, how many spaces left will you go? So I will go left 3 spaces down the number line. So we're going 3 spaces down the number line. You now know that you can say to yourself, I start at 5. And my answer, because I'm going left, my answer will be 2. Now, like I said, I know I'm repeating myself. Trust me, guys, if you can get this dialogue going in your head. Now look at it. It's 2 sentences worth of dialogue. Every last piece of it makes perfect sense. It's very orderly. It's very logical. And when you do the logical part of it, it's just so much easier to comprehend. You're not trying to memorize anything. It's not based off the last 2 answers you've done. You have to apply and you got to think your way through it. So that's how we did the addition part today, and we did 2 or 3 days of that. Today we did multiplication and division. When we do multiplication and division, we're back to this chart here, that if the signs are the same, it's positive. If the signs are different, it's negative. So when we're doing questions today, the easiest questions you're going to get in grade 7 and 8 is something along the lines of this. So -3 times +2, you would recognize that that's a negative sign, that's a positive sign. Remembering your rule, if the signs are opposite, you know the answer is going to be a negative number, and 3 times 2 is 6, that'll be -6. We could do tons and tons of examples. You're going to get some practice in your books, but that's not where we're going today. We are going to start BEDMAS and order of operations again. So I'll pause it for a second. We'll look at BEDMAS and we'll get started. So there's our acronym BEDMAS, and we filled it in class, and we've done it enough times now that I hope you know that B stands for brackets, E stands for exponents, D and M are division and multiplication, and A and S are addition and subtraction. And always remember, guys, that the division and multiplication are linked, and they are linked in the order they appear in your number sentence. Also, addition and subtraction are linked, and whatever one comes first between addition and subtraction you'll do, and whatever comes first between division and multiplication you'll do. This does not carry over between multiplication and addition, however. It's just the division and the multiplication are linked, and the addition and subtraction are linked as a pair. So I have a couple of smaller examples here before we get too crazy, and move this out of our way. And our question says 3 times -2 plus 6. We refer back to our order of operations up here. There are no brackets to do. Truly, yes, -2 is in a bracket, but there's no work to do inside of it. It's just put in a bracket so that you don't confuse the negative sign and right beside a multiplication sign. There are no exponents to do. There is no division to do, so the first thing we have is this multiplication question. So 3 times -2 is a +3 times a -2. From our rule today that if the signs are opposite or different, your answer will be a negative answer. So go ahead and put your negative. 3 times 2 is 6. So that'll be a -6 there. And you write down your +6 there. So now there is no rule. Now we're going to add these integers together, and you have to use logic. And remember, I'll say it just like I want you to be thinking of it. -6, I'm going to add some hot to it. If I'm going to add hot, it's going to get bigger, it's going to get larger, it's going to get hotter. It's going to move right down the number line. I'm starting at -6. If I add 6 more, the only place I can go with that is to 0. And that's our answer for this question. When you go over to the next one, you see a lot of -3s, but there's different operations at play. The first is -3 times -3 plus -3. I put all the -3s there on purpose just to see if you would differentiate between the negatives and the number and the signs and operations going on. So using BEDMAS, again, we're not doing any brackets. There's nothing to do there. There's no exponents. There's no division, but there is multiplication again. So a negative number times a negative number, remember, if our signs are the same, we'll give you a positive number, so that will be 9. And we still have to write down -3. Now it's talking our way through it. Now we have to use logic because there is no steadfast rule for addition or subtraction of integers. You have to think it out and think where you are. I know that I'm going to be adding cold. I'm going to be adding a smaller number. I know it's going to be getting colder. it's going to be getting smaller. When something gets smaller or gets colder, it goes to the left on the number line. If I'm starting at 9 and I'm moving left 3 spaces down the number line, the only possible answer I can get is 6. I'm going to do 2 more, and then it's up to you guys to review it and just keep practicing. You will get it. All right, now here are our last 2 questions, and these questions are probably a little bit big for grade 7s. Not by much though, and I honestly believe all the grade 7s could do it. So if you're looking for a little bit of additional work or a little bit to challenge yourself, because math should be challenging. If it's too easy, you're really not learning too much. So challenge yourself at all times. But that being said, it's a little bit big for the grade 7s, but I encourage them to give it a shot. We've already done exponents, and there in our first one here, 3 squared, that's an exponent. We can't go at it first, however, because there is some bracket work to do here. So in brackets, we have -2 plus -4. There is no steadfast rule, so you have to say, okay, it's cold, I'm adding more cold, therefore it's going to get even colder. When something gets colder, that's going to move left down my number line by 4. If I started at -2, that would put me at -6. And then you write the rest of your question. Now we're looking at this, and we have to do our exponents next. Please remember that 3 squared is not 3 times 2, but it is 3 times 3. 3 times 3 is 9. Write down the rest of your question. So now we have 9 plus -6 times -2. Some kids will make a mistake and jump right out into that because it's next in line, but we haven't done BEDMAS in a while now, a few months now. But if you think about it, we know that multiplication comes before addition, so we will have to write this 9 and do what is ever over here. There is a rule for multiplication, so a negative times a negative, the signs are the same. Whenever you have the same signs, it will always give you a positive answer, and 6 times 2 is 12. And we're almost done. You have 9 plus positive 12. Not much to even think through here because really it's 9 plus 12. 9 plus 12 is 21. If you look at your whole question, let me put it up there for you. That looks pretty darn good. Very neat, very organized, very logical. All right, we have one last question to do. And here it is. Again, a little bit big for the grade 7s, but nothing that they couldn't do if they wanted to take a shot at it. We first have a large set of brackets. Yes, there is an exponent there, but remember, brackets comes first. So we have to add this -6 and this -2. If I have -6 and I'm going to add more to it, more cold to it, it's going to get even colder. That's left down the number line by 2. So this here will be -8. Don't forget to put that squared sign back up because we haven't done that to it yet. I'll write down the rest of my question, keeping it all neat and organized. Forgot my equal signs. Now I have -8 squared, which means -8 times -8. Don't be fooled and do -8 times 2. Anyhow, -8 times -8 is 64, because remember, if the signs are the same, it's going to be a positive answer. Write down the rest, just like you see it. In here, we don't touch the 64 yet, because we're going to have to do this multiplication question. 3 times -2. A positive times a negative will always give us a negative answer, so that's going to be -6 plus 2. Now, realistically, I have 64 plus -6 plus 2. If I start at the beginning 64 and I'm going to add cold, that means I'm going to go left down my number line by 6. If I was at 64 and I add 6 cold to it, that will take me to 58. And then if I'm at 58, I can still do it in one step because it's pretty easy. 58 plus 2 is 60. This is done with practice and patience and thought and care, but you guys can do it.